Whole disk encryption options for Mac OS X are limited to say the least, but as of OS X Lion and newer versions of OS X, Apple now offers FileVault2, which you can see here in front of you. And this is the web page for FileVault2. This is Apple's version of whole disk encryption that technically is really actually volume encryption, but it does come free and is bundled with OS X now. Let's consider the good points first. With most of the Macs, the crypto happens in hardware, so enabling FileVault2 has a somewhat limited impact on performance. The I/O penalty was found to be in the order of 20 to 30% when using CPUs with the AES instruction set, such as the Intel Core i. FileVault2 uses the user's login password as the encryption passphrase. It uses the AES XTS mode of AES with 128-bit blocks and a 256-bit key to encrypt the disk, which is fine. Importantly, there is pre-boot authentication, which we would want. You can set a firmware password to prevent direct memory access DMA attacks that come via the interfaces such as FireWire and Thunderbolt. Another positive for Apple, they have a public appearance at least and policy of not conforming to requests for backdoors and weakening of encryption, which is always good. It has a fairly user-friendly interface. It's easy to use, as you might expect from Apple. It's just a few clicks and it's working. So that's good for easily getting it up and running. Now for some of the bad points about FileVault2. And to quote Apple here, when using FileVault2 whole disk encryption, the initial authentication takes place as part of the EFI pre-boot authentication process. At this early stage of the boot phase, none of the OS-reliant services are able to load because they're dependent on the OS running. This means that alternative authentication mechanisms other than password-based authentication aren't supported at this time. End quote. Well, what that really means is they just haven't developed them yet. So there's no multi-factor authentication with FileVault. Password only, and it's the password of your user for the operating system. Some Apple computers do have onboard TPM, but Apple simply does not use the TPM hardware. In Apple computer models that do contain a TPM, the hardware is available for use by the machine's owner. Of course, to use it, you need a device driver, which Apple doesn't provide. Apple uses EFI for its line of Intel-based Macs, Mac OS X 10.4 Tiger and Mac OS X 10.5 Leopard implement EFI version 1.10 in 32-bit mode, even on newer 64-bit CPUs. But full support arrived with Mac OS X 10.8 Mountain Lion. Even so, they do not support UEFI secure boot. FileVault uses the user's login and password, as I've mentioned, as the encryption passphrase, and a separate password for encryption would be better. Previous versions of FileVault were riddled with implementation vulnerabilities. FileVault has a bad track record so far, but with FileVault2, there was a complete redesign improving how encryption was done. FileVault does not encrypt the boot volumes, which is not good. If you put your device in standby mode, the FileVault key is stored in EFI to transparently come out of standby mode. This is a clear vulnerability. This can be manually prevented though by the PM set command, which I'll show you in a minute. There is no hidden volumes or containers with FileVault. Also, long used unencrypted volumes that contain sensitive data that you then decide that you want to use FileVault on and you encrypt could still contain that sensitive data in parts of the encrypted volume even after activation of FileVault2. This is a known issue. So you want to use FileVault on a new system that has no data on it. The entropy of the recovery password could be improved. If you're concerned about local forensics, encryption is obvious to an observer, so it doesn't allow for plausible deniability. It's obvious that you've got FileVault running if you do have it running. Filevault2 is the least security functional whole disk encryption option that comes bundled in with leading main operating systems, OS X, Linux, Windows. Filevault2 is the least security functional. Saying all that though, Filevault2 is recommended for Mac users who are concerned about their device being lost or stolen and their data being accessed in that event. It is a less robust solution against a serious adversary than other disk encryption options available for other operating systems, and if you're looking for a container or partition encryption solution, then Veracrypt is recommended. So that's Filevault2.